Hi, I am Margaret Hollingsworth. Today is November 11th, 2023. I am with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation Share Your Story project. Bellevue University is the sponsor of the NVFMF Memorial Park project, and I am at the Bellevue University Military Veterans Service Center with Dale and Linda Sutton, who served in the United States Marine Corps
and Air Force,
who has agreed to share his story for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project and the Nebraska Vietnam Memorial Project. Let's begin with your full name.
Dale Vern Sutton.
Dale, tell us where you were born.
Born in Omaha, Nebraska, raised in Papillion, Nebraska.
What day were you born?
December 19th, 1945.
Tell us a little bit about your parents and like what their occupations were.
Well, my dad was a hardware store owner. He bought that store at the end of the Second World War and had it for a little over 20-some years. And my mom had worked for let's see, Omaha Life Insurance up here. And when we moved to Papillion, she had a lot of clerical skills. So she went to work for a law office, Victor Schmidt's law office. And he later became a district judge for Sarpy County in eastern Nebraska. Anyway, I was raised in Papillion all the way through from toddler on up. Well, pretty much. We got out here in 1952, so there's 7 years. I was pretty much 7 years old when we moved here to Papillion. What was nice back then is it was perfectly safe for a child to walk to school in this town with absolutely no fear of any problems, which was really comforting to the parents and me both, and to all of us students. I started out in the old Papillion grade school, which is across the street from the junior high school here in town. Back then this school was built, I don't know if it was in the 1800s, but it was an old school. And from there I went over to junior high school, and that was what was classified back then the Papillion Senior High School. Where are we going from now?
Did you have any siblings?
No siblings.
No siblings. What were your parents' feelings about you joining the service?
Well, my mom had passed away. She died in 1962 of a heart attack. My dad was he was disappointed. He never expressed much of it. My parents were much older. My dad was born in 1901. My mom was born in 1904. So they were quite a bit older than I was as a baby. Very unexpected baby. And Dad had visions of me going through business school and taking over the hardware store. And when I told him I had signed up to go into the Marine Corps, he just, "You did what?" Yes, I did. I joined on a 90-day delay program in February of 1964. A friend of mine, quote, friend, I wonder how good a friend he was. Anyway, he kind of twisted my arm and he talked me into going in a buddy program into the Marine Corps, which is what they had at the time. You go in two of them, you go through boot camp together, all the way up through Camp Pendleton training and so forth, and whatever. We split ways after that. I've often questioned why did I listen to him to go in the Marine Corps, but I did, and ended up in San Diego.
Were you married when you joined?
Oh no, I graduated high school on the 26th of May, 1964. I was in San Diego boot camp the morning of the 27th of May, 1964. I didn't even have time to turn around, go to kiss any girls goodbye or nothing else. I was in the service I woke up, I went to bed one day and I was in the Marine Corps boot camp the next. You talk about a rude awakening. Yes, it was rude awakening.
Can you tell us about when you went into the military? Were you drafted or?
Volunteered. Well, 90-day delay is a volunteer program.
Why did you join the service? Why did you join the Marine Corps?
It was kind of cool back then, you know. The Second World War had just ended. There was a lot of veterans around, and they made a lot of war movies and stuff like that. I kind of figured, well, it's kind of cool to go in the service, so I did.
So you joined the Marine Corps. Why did you pick the Marine Corps?
Be honest with you, because Gene and I looked at them and we just decided we were going in the Marines.
Okay. Where was your initial point of entry?
My who?
Initial point of entry. Like, where did you go to basic training?
No. I went to Fort Omaha and then we went down to the airport, got on a plane and went to San Diego. It was Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, California. Rude awakening.
Can you tell us about basic training?
A lot of physicality. We were not allowed to do very much. We were always told where to go and what to do. And that's kind of standard for a boot camp training. My boot camp lasted, well, I was in San Diego for boot camp for 4 months back then. And then we went to Camp Pendleton for another month of extended boot camp training up there. So essentially, I spent the first 5 months of my Marine Corps in boot camp. And I came back home and went back to Camp Pendleton. I was assigned to Camp Pendleton. Of course, you do everything that they tell you to do. So when they said, well, we're shipping out to go to Okinawa, ooh, that's a place overseas. I'd heard of Okinawa from the Second World War and so forth. So we're going through Japan to get there, though, so we will be traveling to Japan first. And as it turns out, we went overseas on a World War II transport scow called the Okanagan. You can look it up. This is a troop transport that was way past its prime. On the way to Japan, about, let's just say for general principles, at least 10 days, I think it was more like 15 days outside of Yokohama is where we went. We ran out of all food except the old sliced roast beef. Now, everybody can probably remember the old sliced gravy roast beef, thin slices. You get it a lot of restaurants in the service at every mess hall. That was all we had. Now I ask everybody here, how many ways can you cook sliced roast beef for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Every day for 15 days. I finally got tired of eating roast beef. Can you imagine that? Then we got into Yokohama, and from there it was just a short trip back to Okinawa. Well, Okinawa was stationed in Camp Kin's thing I remember was Kin Village at Camp Kin, something like that. It's a Marine base. It's still on the map. It's still there. And there we went through further training, and I had a little bit of this is just part of the training. We went to what they called raid school. Raid school on Okinawa at that time was to teach you how to silently kill somebody. And they showed all the techniques and so forth to us, so that if you could sneak up on somebody, which is kind of hard to actually sneak up on a person, but then you know how to take them out with a silent way of doing it. In the process of that, we had some hand-to-hand combat training. This is a little side note. My unit, when we got there, we were India 3-1 in the States. We went into Alpha 1-9 when we got to Okinawa. When we went over to that part of the world, we were called 1-9. And in our unit, we had a sergeant at the time, Mendoza, assigned to the unit. He just happened to be the Marine Corps representative to the hand-to-hand combat competition for the armed services, and he won the competition, and he was assigned to our unit. We had an instructor in raid school that was supposed to be teaching us all about hand-to-hand combat, and he asked for a volunteer. Well, we all knew Mendoza's history, so we sit there and pushed him forward to get him up there. Raise your hand, go on up there, Sarge. He was a sergeant. So we did that. He got up there in front of this big husky Marine instructor, and I mean, this guy was a big boy. And he sits there and he says, "Okay, this is how we do this." And he went to throw it, and he didn't move. And he took a different position and he started to work on him again, and he didn't move. He says, "Okay, what's going on here? Have you had some hand-to-hand combat training?" "Who, me?" "Yes, I have. My name is Sergeant Mendoza. I represent the U.S. Marine Corps at the Armed Services Competition." "Oh, you're that guy!" And he just went ballistic on that. He was very happy to see him and all that. He said, "You can use me as a demonstration." And he flipped him all over the beach. Just absolutely made that instructor look like a poor country rascal from nowhere. But that was what we did on Okinawa. And one day while we were there at training, word came down. We would do this training in groups. Okay, we had the battalion of Marines on the island in our camp at that time. Okay, we do this training sometimes as a company, sometimes as a platoon. Well, we were down there in company training, and an announcement come down to us, and they says, "Guys, you're going to Vietnam." Anybody know what Vietnam is? None of us had any idea where or what Vietnam was. None of us did. So, now this is the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines. They're pretty famous for going into Vietnam. Now when we went to Vietnam, there were other Marines and some Army already in country. There were advisors in country. But in the month of June 1965, June 16th, I remember the day, it was etched in my mind. That was the day that we got out of the landing craft, carried our weapons and packs, and walked ashore just like the Marine Corps landing in Europe in World War II. Or the islands in the Pacific where the Marines were at. Anyway, we did the same style landing. And we took possession and stayed at Da Nang Air Force Base. There were other branches of 1-9 that were sent up to different bases around there. The 1st Battalion A Company, I think it was assigned to the perimeter of Da Nang as Air Base Guard. Okay, so I was at Da Nang Air Base. Out of there, we'd go on small patrols during the course of the day. And during the Corps overtime, we would have to go up to Hue and Phu Bai and do other patrols, support them up close to the DMZ. We were all over kind of down there, just anywhere they needed us. And then came down a directive that, more Marines had come to Vietnam by this time. We're looking at a couple months down the road. In the fall, probably into the fall, on into December time frame. 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines came over, and other units had come over to Vietnam by that time. And the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines were tasked. They said, well, see, the word came down to us kind of like this. You guys have been here quite a while now. You've got some seasoning, as one person put it. And we had the benefit of some World War II veterans in our unit and some Korean veterans in the unit. They were still in from the time. They were getting a little long in tooth, but they were still in the Marines. They were retiring. And we all went to Vietnam, so we had experience with us. Well, the younger troops coming over from the States did not have that benefit. There were no senior NCOs in any of these units. They were all pretty much fresh out of basic going to Vietnam. And when they would perform duties around the base at Da Nang and other bases, they tended to see their own patrols out there on, they'd see somebody off in the distance. Oh boy, we got movement. We got Vietnamese, we got whatever. And they call in artillery and airstrikes, as it turns out, on some of their own troops, which was not good, of course. So they said, what we're going to do with you guys is we're going to take you and we're going to put you with these other units. And they moved 1-9 into 2-9 and other units. 3-9, I suppose, was there. I ended up going into 2-9, into 2 different companies. Foxtrot, Echo, ended up in India. Okay, 2-9. Okay. And we were assigned out of Da Nang, further inland a little bit. Distances over there, we didn't have anything to measure distances. We'd be trucked into this place and set up a camp, and that was it. How far did we go? Oh, 5-6 miles, maybe 10, I don't know. And we'd set up a camp, a forward camp, all working toward the Ho Chi Minh Trail, because they monitored the trail a lot. And during this time, most of my unit, now this is moving on past the first year, and I think it was probably, now we went over originally, we landed in Okinawa for 60 or 90 days. We were supposed to be there for 90 days, then rotate back to the States. Didn't work that way. We got into Vietnam in June, and we spent all the time to December. Come to find out in January, many of my original unit were being transferred back to the States. Well, I went through February, March, April, May, almost a year over there, and this was supposed to be, let's say 90 or 6 months tour. That's what it was supposed to be, Okinawa for 6 months, back to the States. So I was there almost a double tour, essentially. And we had a task come down for a company of Marines, which is about 160, because we had a weapons platoon assigned to us. We had 3 platoons with weapons. Okay. I look at it as 40-man platoons. And at that time, I was a team chief. I was not a squad leader, but I was just a team chief. And we were tasked with going inland from a forward point to check out the Ho Chi Minh Trail. There was a company-wide trip. And our company commander at the time was a first lieutenant. I think he was a first lieutenant. I don't think he was a second. So if he was a first lieutenant, anyway, we were walking, we started out crossing a little small pontoon bridge because the Vietnamese had blown up the big bridge. So we had a pontoon bridge to go across. We got out into the middle of a field, walking across the field, and that particular day was a little ominous to me. No more than got started, and I stepped into a hole and got a punji stake in the back of my boot. Well, that turned out to be, it nicked my heel. So I says, "Hey, Corman, can I get a Purple Heart for that?" He says, "Probably so." Okay, so I got to regress a little bit. There was another patrol that we went on. When I said we went to Way and Dubai, one of those we went up there on, we were walking through a tree line, and my team chief was in front of me at that time. He was out there, probably 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet in front, and he stepped on a bouncing Betty. It popped up out of the ground, took his legs off, and hit a little bit of shrapnel. I caught a piece of shrapnel in my leg. I think if I look real hard, I'll find that scar. So if you want to get technical, that was the second Purple Heart, but that was the first one. Then the punji stakes, that was a good one. When my foot went in the ground, it went through the seam on the back of the boot, kind of at an angle. These were old, brittle punji stakes, but they would still work. Went in through the boot, nicked my heel, put a bandage on it, and away we went. Okay. We continued walking across this field to a tree line where the idea is to go down, and we were 5 miles in, going to check the Ho Chi Minh Trail for activity to see what's going on. We just go up and check the trail out, see if there's anybody there, go up 3 or 4 or 5 miles north, turn around and come back to our camp. That was it. That was all of our assignments, company patrol. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we started to pick up some sniper fire. The lieutenant didn't think too much of it. We all got down. Process of going down, getting up, or somewhere in there, I ended up getting shot, and I caught a round in this arm, right underneath between my shoulder and my body here. It went through and it just nicked my left arm. I got a nice scar on that one too. So anyway, that didn't stop us. He was gung-ho and he wanted to complete the mission, the lieutenant. Okay, so we kept going. Well, on this particular deal, most of this I found out about what had happened to us later on. We walked into an area with a large rice paddy in front of us, a big pagoda. The Vietnamese build pagodas all over the place. They had small pagodas out in the middle of the rice field and a big one back here, kind of a central area. We walked into the middle of a battalion of North Vietnamese regulars going back to Hanoi. They determined they were going up there on R&R from Saigon back to Hanoi. 1,500 of them and 160 of us. Well, we were right in the middle of them before we knew it. We walked in the middle of their base camp, but we didn't know that. And we set up around this big pagoda. The Vietnamese were nice at the time. They would, and everybody can confirm this, they would dig trenches all over the fields around every structure that they had. They dig trenches. Well, we set up in their trenches. This is cool because they had trenches. We had a trench that ran back toward our unit, which is a couple miles behind us by this time. We thought we'd run down the trench and go backward that way. Well, the trench turned as the troops running back. 3 of them made the turn. They had a machine gun set up in the trench and killed the first 3 people that made the turn. So we had to close that off. We buried that trench in. And then we set up around this pagoda. We had pretty much a 4-sided perimeter. It was more or less 3 because the back end was where our unit was back there. And they didn't see the mess. It was an open field and very easy to pick anybody off coming across it. So they just guarded that. So they didn't try to attack that way. Let's just look at it as that would be toward the west at the time. And we had a north, east, and south perimeter around us. Okay. I would have been on the south side of this. I had a team with me. At the time, three of my best friends in Vietnam. They were all on my team. We were set up in a ditch. Along the side, we had a huge rice paddy in front of us with many little white pagodas out there. By this time, we had already sustained quite a few casualties. And the idea was to bring in some helicopters for helivacs. Well, they did. First helicopter they shot down out in the field never got to us. Okay. Word come down again. We're going to have another helicopter come in trying to get these troops out. Well, they did, and they shot that one down too. We were fortunate to the fact that it landed within our perimeter, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit later. But it landed in our perimeter next to the pagoda that we were surrounding. They called in artillery rounds. Well, it seems like I was told this, that the artillery drops a couple rounds right on point, possibly within your camp, to get the target spot of where they wanted to shoot. Okay, the first 3 rounds of artillery landed in our perimeter, killing another 3 of our troops, as it turned out. But the effect of that artillery, Marine Corps artillery that night, saved our lives. These artillery people dropped rounds around us as close as 30 feet around our perimeter, out in front, north, south, east, and west. Around that perimeter, 30 to 50 feet out, in a constant bombardment all night long. Never missed a minute. It was just boom, boom, boom all night long to keep the Vietnamese from overrunning us. They couldn't get at us because of the artillery. Well, okay. While this was all going on my side of the field, when that second helicopter came in, the lieutenant passed word that I was carrying a LAW, light anti-tank weapon, a pull-apart tube. Becomes a bazooka. If you slide out, pop the ends off and slide this thing out, it becomes a decent bazooka. And he says, all you people carrying LAWs, these little tiny pagodas out in this field, if you see any pagodas out there with a lot of, they use tracers too, just like we did, to see where the rounds were going. If you see any tracers coming up at the helicopter, we want you to shoot it with the LAW. Take the thing out so we can get this helicopter in and get it back out. Well, I'm sitting there with the LAW. I got 2 of my team on my left. I got 1 on my right. All of us were real good, close friends. We were all facing out into this field, and I had the LAW, had my helmet on. I tipped my helmet up on top of the LAW. They had a little sight on the LAW that you could look through. I was looking through the sight. I tipped my helmet up, and I'm just barely over the berm of this trench that we were buried in. And that helicopter started to come in, and 1 pagoda out here in front of us, lots of tracers were coming up out of this thing. They were shooting at the helicopter with rifle fire. Okay. So I said, there's my target. And I sit there and I hit the switch. And at that point, my whole life blew up, period. I didn't know if that LAW blew up. I had no idea what had happened. I suffered a concussion. I had all kinds of holes in my head, just off the scalp and so forth. If you get hit in your head, you bleed a lot. I was covered in blood. One of the pieces of shrapnel went straight through my helmet, down to my hairline. I've got a scar up here from it, straight out the back. It was that close to my taking me out. I didn't know what had happened. They laid me down. I remember being laid down in this trench. That's all I remembered at the time. The next day, I got helivac'd out. We made it through the night. One of my friends came over and visited, a couple of them came over and visited me in the hospital. They were talking to me in the bed. And I was feeling pretty foxy that day. It was a couple days after this. I didn't feel too bad. I said, let me get up. I went to get up. I passed out, straight to the floor. I had lost so much blood that there was just nothing left. I just went straight down to the floor. Well, anyway, they got me back up. I woke back up. They said, do you have any idea what happened? I said, I don't have a prayer. I got hit, knocked out, and they stacked us like wood underneath this pagoda. I remember 3 or 4 of us being in there, and that was it. They had a lot of people in there. And he says, well, this is what actually happened. He said, we watched it. They were bringing in mortars. And he said, we could see the mortars they were targeting, and what they did was you'd have a boom out in the field. Boom, a little bit closer. Boom, that's the noise a mortar makes when it hits. Boom, again. Where we were lined up, it was me, my buddy, and 2 over here. 15 feet over here, we had a kind of a big bush. I remember the bush being there. The bush disappeared. The last mortar round landed on that bush. Killed him, killed these 2, and I got shrapnel, and here I am today. Why did I survive? That was my only question. It can't be answered, only God knows. But from that point on, I was getting back to the States, home on leave, back to Camp Pendleton. Then I came back to Nebraska. I actually got married to my first wife while I was at Camp Pendleton. She was a Marine. And we came back to Nebraska. Okay. I tried a couple jobs here in Nebraska. My dad had sold the hardware store by that time, so there was no hope of getting into that. He said, I didn't know when you were coming home, so we got rid of it. Okay. Come to find out, civilian life was just, I don't know, it was okay, but I liked the military. I didn't want to go back and walk through Vietnam again. Oh, incidentally, when I left Camp Pendleton, I had a first sergeant out there. He was a World War II veteran. His name was Cipher, First Sergeant Cipher. He had been busted so many times for fighting and having problems with officers. The last time, some officer gave him some kind of a bad order. He didn't like the order, so he cold-cocked this lieutenant. Just absolutely, he knocked 2 teeth out of him and knocked him out. Well, they were pretty good to Sergeant Cipher. They said, you can finish out your tour, but you'll not get promoted. Okay. He told me while I was at Camp Pendleton when I went back, he says, Dale, I'll tell you what. You sign on a dotted line here, I can make you E5 today. You sign, you're an E5. They were losing people right and left in Vietnam, so it was easy to get promotions. And he said, I'll keep you here at Camp Pendleton for another 6 months. And I guarantee you, if you stay here for 6 more months with me, I'll make you an E6. This would have been an E6 probably under 4 years in the Marine Corps, which was unheard of. Okay, so I'm sitting here thinking about that, and I says, you know, Top, if you'd been hit as many times in Vietnam as I had, would you go back again for another shot? And he kind of twisted his head, looked at me a little, he says, probably not. And I says, I'm not either, so that's when I came home to Nebraska. So we're here in Nebraska trying to work. Didn't enjoy it that much. Liked the service, so I decided to go in the Air Force. I went down and talked to them. They said, oh yeah, we'll be happy to take you. Young guy like you, yes sir, we'll take you right now. can I get into computers? He said, let me check. And he checked. He got back to me a day later. He says, I can't get you into computers, but I can get you into aircraft. Doing what? Aircraft maintenance? I says, okay. So I went to Shepherd Air Force Base in 1968 and went through C-130 aircraft school. And that's when I went to Langley Air Force Base, and from Langley you go TDY on C-130 aircraft all the time. You're just gone. Temporary duty yonder all the time. One of my assignments was to build in all England, which we called Moldy Hole, and because it was constantly wet, rainy, cloudy, miserable more or less at Mildenhall. Out of Mildenhall, I had an opportunity as a crew chief to travel around Europe, fly with the plane here and there and everywhere. Went to a lot of different places. It was only 3 months and I came back to the States. My wife that I had at the time, we had problems and we ended up getting a divorce. Okay. I ended up with a young baby boy at the time and an assignment going to Rhine-Main, Germany. Well, I had a little trepidation over that, folks. What would it be like trying to raise a child over in Germany? I'm a United States person. I like it over here. Would it be okay over there? I didn't want to go. So I put in for tech school instructor and got it right back to Shepherd Air Force Base. So that's where I ended up going, back to Shepherd Air Force Base. Come to find out later, talking to people there, oh, you should have gone to Germany. Why? Well, for one thing, Germany is a great assignment, and you can get German Fräuleins or ladies, whatever, to come in and take care of that little baby and clean your house and everything else for almost nothing. Ooh, ouch. I probably should have gone, but I didn't. So I ended up at Shepherd Air Force Base. Well, I was there for 3 years. In 1970, I was on a bowling team at Shepherd Air Force Base. Now let's go back one. 69, when the astronauts landed on the moon in July of 1969, my ex-wife came back. She got a hold of my baby son, took him, and vanished. Just left. Yeah, technically it's kidnapping, but I was told by the Texas authorities that, well, it's the mother of the child. We won't look real hard for her. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is 1970. Oh well. So anyway, I just kind of let that part of my life go. She was gone, and they didn't have a clue as to where she went. She bought an old Buick, 55 Buick, for $500 that I didn't know she had. Put him and half the stuff we had in the house she took with her, threw it all in that car, and vanished. Oh well. So there was a bunch of us at the instructors class there that were on a bowling team. Okay, this is important now. We were bowlers. And we had a Friday night bowling league. Okay. My best friend was living in my trailer at the time with me. His name was Gaylord Andrew Crichton, nicknamed Skip. Okay, so Skip and I were living in this trailer park. And we'd go to the NCO club after we went bowling. Skip says, how'd you like to have a date tonight? I said, I don't know anybody to ask for a date. And he says, well, I'll talk to Bobby, that was his girlfriend, and see if she can scare up a date for you. Well, that's about the size of it. So anyway, we were at the bowling alley, and Bobby and this girl come in. And Linda can attest to this. Didn't you say something like, I bet you got the good looking one? Yeah. She told Bobby, I bet you got the good looking one. That's not to say much. I wasn't that bad looking, you know. I wasn't ugly. But anyway, so we had a date that night. We went to the club. And I must have had, I don't know if somebody hit me over the head, and, you know, and just got me absolutely whatever. But I went head over heels for that little gal that came in there with her for her date, for my date. And there was a few things that just kind of set the fireworks off in my mind that night. That just things that happened and did, you know, went around. And we went back to the house. We sat there and talked for a bit, for a long time. This is a Friday night, folks. What do you think about marriage? Well, I'd like to get married someday. You want to marry me? Oh, sure, why not? 1 week later, on Saturday night,
Linda.
I married Linda Noble, and that, my folks, was 53 years past.
Yay.
So it's 53-year marriage to a beautiful lady over here who has been a wonderful wife, mother to my children, just a great helpmate all my life. So I'm at Shepherd Air Force Base. Well, I knew I wasn't going to stay there forever. Nope. They sent me to CCK, Taiwan. Ching Chong Kong, Taiwan. And again, not too far from my favorite place, Vietnam. Okay, so here I am on CCK, Taiwan. And as it turns out, I got to Taiwan, I still had my passport from going to Europe. Well, they were happy to see me because every time they went to one of the national countries over there, into Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore was our depot facility for C-130 aircraft, a crew chief had to go, but he had to have a passport. Well, as it turned out, they got all these planes, all these people, and only one person on the base had a passport. That was me. So guess who got to go to all these nice places while I was there? Number one, me. So, in process of going all over the place over there, which I did, we would fly regular runs to Tan Sa Nut Air Force Base, Vietnam, through there down to Utapao, Thailand. And they would fly more missions out of Utapao, and then we'd go back to Tan Sa Nut and back to CCK for phase dock inspections and so forth, and just general airplane maintenance. Okay. One day, and it's on my letter here somewhere, but anyway, one day when we just came back in from our trip from Utapao. And we landed, and I told my assistant, Larry Best, to go down and get some sleep. I'll watch over the aircraft that night. So I did. And they sent me out a very basic young airman who was just on CCK, just from the States. And he was going to help me do the post-flight on my aircraft. Well, part of the story. I said, why don't you go get a B-1 maintenance stand? There's a big maintenance stand. You have to use that to get up on the front of the plane, look at the air vents and so forth. And okay, so he went over and got that. And for some reason, I must have been a little bit close to the stand as he rolled it back. Well, this had two nice big metal wheels on the back of it and two great big rubber tires on the front of this stand. Well, he ran one of those metal wheels right over my right big toe, breaking my toe. Oh, and I went into the line chief. Hey, go down to sick bay and get that thing taken care of. Okay, so I got down there, and I've hobbled back out there. I kind of stumbled back the flight line. I said, well, I'm back. He says, okay. Hey, I need 2 planes to go to Clark Air Force Base and sit for a while. Really? What's this about? He said, well, they're going down there to probably assist in what they're calling Operation Homecoming, which is the removal of our prisoners out of North Vietnam coming back to Clark. I need 2 planes. My plane's ready to go. We just got back in. We just took care of it. Ooh, all excited. I was just tickled pink. He says, you just broke your toe. I don't care if I got a bubble on my toe. I want to go. I'm going. Oh, okay. So I called Larry, got him back up out of bed, back to the flight line. We pre-flighted that plane, got it all ready to go. It was ready. It was always ready. But it happened to be, at the time, the C-130 I was crewing was the C-130 with the most flying hours in the Southeast Theater, period. It had more flying hours than any other plane on the base. But we went to Clark Air Force Base. Two of our planes did, me and another crew. Okay. We landed at Clark, and there was a big delay getting things going. So we were sitting on Clark Air Force Base for about, let's say, a week. And they put us up in the visiting officers' quarters with steak every day. Treated like absolute kings in this officers' quarters. And we were just NCOs. We'd never been treated like this before. This was fabulous. I want to stay here. Anyway, finally the day came where we were to go do the lift out of North Vietnam. We would be what amounts to the very first plane to ever land at Hanoi Airstrip in North Vietnam, American plane. They took my C-130 and stuffed, I can't count the number of generals and officers inside my plane. It was filled to the gills with big brass officers, 3 4-star generals. Reason being, we were to take them all into North Vietnam. They would get out of my plane and go down and inspect the last holding point of all these prisoners according to the Geneva Convention. That was the reason. So we got to North Vietnam, and the pilot had to dodge the holes in the runway that the B-52s had bombed this place absolutely into oblivion. And he was, you can't imagine, the plane was going up and down over these big bumps. We finally got parked on a little side ramp. And all the generals and everybody debarked. And I was left there with Larry on my plane. And they were so kind, they stuck a North Vietnamese guard on my plane to guard the plane. I just sit there, I kind of laughed and chuckled at that. But over from our plane, we were on a side ramp. Also at the same time that we went in, we were the first plane to land in North Vietnam. They had 2 airlifts. I was on the first one, went into North Vietnam. Okay. They had a big bombed out hangar. I mean, the roof. Hello, stars. You look up through the roof. This thing was in bad shape, but it was still standing, and they had the second floor. And on the second floor they had gotten, and I don't know how they got it up there, they had a tremendously big mahogany table, North Vietnam. This table was where they were going to sign the release of the prisoners coming out of North Vietnam. All the generals around one side, all the North Vietnamese, people standing behind them too. Everybody couldn't sit, there were so many. But the 2 big ones were at the end. North Vietnamese signed, our general signed, and that was the signatures for the release of prisoners. Well, they walked out of that building, and a C-141 hospital ship had taxied up close to the building on the side where we walked out. the general sits there and he looks over at the C-141, the crew over there and so forth, and he says, "Are you ready?" And they said, "Yes, we are, sir." He looked over the other way, and the prisoners of war were behind concertina wire. They had it stretched across the end of the runway down here, all the way across. And they said, "Okay, board the aircraft." Crying, crawling, hobbling, crutches, you name it, jumping up and down, the ones that could. All these prisoners ran from that area they were held in over and got on board into this airplane, the 141. It just made you want to cry and bawl your heart out. It was the highest point of my career, watching those people come out of that wire to get on that plane. Okay, so when the 141 takes off, then the C-130 takes off. Well, as a backup, that day, the other C-130 from Clark had gone into Da Nang Air Force Base, or South Vietnam, was sitting on the ramp at Da Nang. When both planes take off from North Vietnam, then he's cleared to take off from there because everything's okay. That was the first prisoner of war release in 1973 out of North Vietnam. A few days later, we did the second prisoner of war lift. On that one, the other plane got to fly into North Vietnam with all the generals and all that. They had to do the same thing all over again. And that day, I got to fly back into Da Nang. It didn't look anything like it did when I was there the first time. But I got into Da Nang, and while we were sitting on the flight line in the C-130, a DC-9, which they stretched cargo plane, looked like a long cigar with a couple wings on it. It was a long plane, hold a lot of people. This DC-9 came in and landed at Da Nang, and they took every remaining Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine got on that plane. When it took off, my plane was the last plane at that time. I don't know what's happened since. I don't have any idea. But this is my feeling. June 16th, 1965, I went in with 19, the first Marines to really land in Vietnam, do a beach landing in Vietnam. On that day in 73, I was on the last C-130 airplane to take off from Da Nang Air Force Base, South Vietnam. Unless you were a Marine at that time and an airman on that plane, nobody else in the world would have been able to do that. But this guy you're talking to right here. Yes, the war extended. They didn't actually end it until 75, I guess. But that particular day was very special to me, along with the time I spent in North Vietnam. Now you know, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story.
Wow, that's amazing. What got you through the hard times? Like, was it luck? Was it fate?
Yeah.
During Vietnam?
The camaraderie, being with your brothers, you know. Yes, I lost my very close brothers that day when I got hit. But having other ones come to the hospital and tell me what happened was really worth its weight in gold to me, because I didn't have a prayer, no knowledge whatsoever of what really happened on that patrol that day.
How did your time in Vietnam change you? Do you feel it changed you, or?
Well, for a long period of time, I would have dreams and nightmares of Vietnam. I suppose I made up some of it in my dreams, I don't know. But it was pretty bad for a while. I found myself jumping out of bed once in a while and just doing some strange things. That has all kind of passed over the years. The best thing I've ever done before, when Vietnam veterans come back, everybody, what happened over there? What'd you go through? Everybody. Nobody wanted to talk. There's a few of us that have. But I myself, I was working for the post office. That was my next job. I put 20 years with the post office too. And I had a friend who was a retired Air Force pilot. He flew B-52s in Vietnam. I think it was B-52s. Anyway, Michael Shepard was a Douglas County sheriff assigned to Millard West High School. Okay, I knew that. And in the high school itself, there was a teacher that wanted to teach a class about the Vietnam experience of war and so forth. And he would get Mike to go over there and talk Mike was a big talker, so he would talk for an hour easy. But as it turns out, the teacher says, "Did you know anybody that was in Vietnam on the ground?" And Mike and I had met. He says, "I might have a guy." Sitting at Panera Bread one day, Mike asked me if I'd be willing to go share my story with these children, students, high school students at Millard West. I don't know if I want to or not, Mike. He said, "They're kids, they want to learn." Oh, okay. I did it many times, sharing my story with them. The first thing that got rid of all my demons was bringing the troops out of North Vietnam. That was the biggest thing in my life. The second biggest thing was being willing to go talk to these students about what went on with me over there. Doing that and opening up to kids, which are they just want to hear. They weren't judgmental, they didn't care, there was no words, they were happy to see you. We always had pizza. And always had pizza and Coke while we were there too. The school bought that. But that was the best thing I think I ever did to opening up about my experiences in Vietnam after I got back home. But it took a while. That was, 10, 12 years, more than that. And I was with the post office for quite a while before I met Mike. It was probably around the year 2000.
Have you stayed in contact with any of your service men and women from?
No. I don't know where the people from the Air Force went. Now, guys that I did not know, like Mike, I never knew Mike over in Vietnam. Do I know anybody from my old units in Vietnam? No. I never have done that.
Did any of your children go in the military?
Okay. The first son that my wife stole from me, she raised him in a very haphazard manner. But in the first Gulf War, in the early 90s, Alan went into the Army at that time. He was in EOD, which is demolition disposal. He was over in Iraq and came through fine, but he said they had another second lieutenant that was gung-ho, whatever, kind of a hard person to work with. Their job was to check out different buildings to make sure they were safe. Their whole unit, they had a squad of guys who would do this, their whole unit did not want to go in this one building. Nobody wanted, I don't know why, but nobody wanted to go into it. Didn't look safe. Just kind of looked to them to be kind of a scary deal. Somebody's going into that building. I don't care which one of you it is, somebody's going in that building. One of the guys says, oh well, gee, I'll go in, and it blew up. So Alan says, I'm not going to work for somebody that treats his troops like that. So his first opportunity, he got out. Well, he spent, now, I didn't know all this until this is the story of my son. I did not see him from 1969 until 1999. 30 years. I'd given up. He started driving semi-trailers in the early 90s across eastern United States, mainly out of Lima, Kentucky, up and down the East Coast and stuff like that. And he got into training other drivers. One of the drivers he trained was a young lady named Karen. Well, they got to liking each other a little bit. In 1998, they got married. And he started driving across country. Well, in the process of going cross country, when he was a little tyke, I don't know, I think he said 10 years old. If he was here, he could tell you all this a lot better than me. But they needed a birth certificate. Now his wife hid my name from him totally. He never knew about me at all. She remarried to this guy that was her boyfriend. That was part of the reason we separated. And he raised Alan, but they had other children. But Alan always felt that he was kind of the black sheep of the family. Last to get gifts, last to ask for this, kind of. Yeah, he was there, but he has sisters and brothers, but he just didn't feel like he was part of it. Now he knows why. When he was 10 years old, Mom had to get a birth certificate. Well, he was born in Texas, so she sent to Texas and was sent into the house. Somewhere in the process of that birth certificate coming through, Alan got wait a minute, that's not Dad's name. He got to see it, but she quickly disposed of that. But he saw a name, Dale Sutton. And that name stuck with him. When he started driving across country, all the truck stops had computers. So he tried, for a few years, mind you, to find me. He had a feeling it was Nebraska, okay? He and Karen would drive through Nebraska. Alan actually, and he told me this, they drove by our house a few times, but when he drove by the house in the truck, Karen was there with him, he'd look at the house, he'd say, oh, there's nobody home over there at that house. I can tell that there's nobody home. And they just go on by. And they did it again and again. Linda's in the house. They didn't know that. But she keeps all the blinds pulled and all that most of the time. It looks like nobody's home. Looks like nobody's home. So this one day, it had been raining. This was Labor Day weekend. We were doing a lot of work on the house at this particular time. And that morning we got up, went to Menards. Okay, we got home from Menards, and it had rained. And during the course of this weekend, on the Friday, I had Thursday, Friday, and the weekend. I'd always take a couple extra days with the holiday to get me a little time off from the post office. So during the course of this weekend, I had guys come by my house. Can you tell me where such and such street is, or this address? And I was a mailman, so I knew Papillion. I grew up there. I pretty much knew the town. This one guy drives by. Hey, you know where 3 North Washington Street is 1,000? I said, there's no such number as that. Oh, he's drunk as a skunk. Just absolutely wiped out. He's driving this car. And he stops. So I'm kind of thinking, well, what are we getting ourselves into here? You know, we're getting all these people. And we had quite a few stop because we were always outside. And we just drove up from Menards, had stuff we were going to unload. And this young man comes walking up with shorts wet up above the knee. I mean, Linda, here's another one. And she's sitting there and she looks over and I look over her and he comes up to the driveway and starts walking down and he says, "Are you Dale Sutton?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I'm Alan. I got a cousin in Rising City, Nebraska named Alan. His 2 boys are Chuck and John." I'm dumbfounded. Linda knew right away who it was.
You go, Linda.
She figured that out immediately. It took me probably 1 or 2 minutes sitting there thinking, I'm running this all in my mind. Who is this guy? I'm Alan. Alan? Alan! Oh, gee. And I finally realized with my son, after 30 years, he found me and came back into my life. Further story. A few years after that, he decides, Dad, he'd come by regularly in the truck, he'd stop and spend time. He'd say, Karen and I don't have anything saved up for retirement. I'm thinking of going back in the Army. He was 39 years old. So, he went down and talked to the enlisted. How old are you? I'm 39. His birthday was coming up in about 2 months, I think. Well, you can get in. Good. If you'd have waited 2 more months, we couldn't have taken you. He was that close. He went back in the Army, looking for retirement. He was an E5. Then he made E6. This last year, he made E7.
Wow.
And he's going to be a drill instructor at not in boot camp, but in a technical school same type as I was. But he'll be a DI assigned to Eglin Air Force Base. He's in ammunitions right now.
Is he in the Air Force or Army?
He's in the Army.
Army, okay.
I know exactly where he's at. He's in the EOD part of Eglin.
Well, he'll be teaching ammunitions to these troops, how to handle, take care of. He's got quite an extensive deal there. But by doing that, it's a guaranteed position for E8. So he will make E8 before he gets out. Now
you're a proud daddy there.
Yeah,
Dale. Good job.
he's got some medical issues. He hurt his back a few years ago, really hurt it bad. And he's waiting, he's living with what he's got. He's had it treated and seen chiropractors and other things like that. He's waiting to file the whole disability. They know that he's on record for being disabled as, a bad back. He's waiting till he makes E8. The day he makes E8, he's going to file his retirement papers for disability. And it's a guaranteed disability. And he'll get out as a disabled veteran at that point, as an E8 in the Army. But he's almost going to age out before he gets there.
Well, he shouldn't, or they wouldn't let him in.
He's close.
It doesn't matter. If they let him in, if they let him in, he's going to make it.
He's born in 58, so he's 53, 68, he's 53 right now. 53, 68, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to bring him on board unless he has the ability to do 20 years before
Oh, he's
age
doing
60.
20,
Yeah,
but he's over 20 now.
yeah, no, that's
Oh, okay,
fine.
so he's okay, yeah.
Yeah,
He's
he's
got
good
a
to go.
3-year commitment for E7.
Yep.
It would be a 3-year commitment for E8, but instead of taking the commitment, when he gets a stripe, he's gonna put in for disability discharge. But that's his story.
Very
Do
neat.
you have any other children?
One other boy living in Florida.
Oh, okay.
He's a chef in Florida,
Oh, wow.
kind of a chef. We'll call him a chef. He's been working in fast food all of his life, but he's working for a very high-end pizza bunch, and they make expensive, to me, very expensive pizzas. But when you're in Miami, Florida, price is not, that's the vacation capital. So New Yorkers go down there with lots of money, and they spend lots of money.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear your story?
Well, go through whatever you go through by the grace of God. Because if it wasn't for the good Lord, I wouldn't be here today. Go through what you do with that. Have faith in God that everything will work out. And it will. It takes time sometimes, but it will. Give all credit to Him. Don't take yourself too serious. I've run into a lot of people that, particularly in the Air Force, I had some supervisors that thought they were just, they berate the people below them all the time. We're better than you, all that. And I'd say, okay, if you're that good, you die tomorrow, are they going to find a replacement?
Yeah.
Let me show you how much difference you make. Do the water trick. Get a cup of water. Stick your finger in it. Okay, your finger's in the water, right? Okay, the water went up a little bit. Take your finger out, look at the hole that's left. There's no hole in that water. How much difference did you make? Not much. Be willing to let God run your life, because He's run mine. He's been beside me a lot. I didn't even know He was there most of the time, but He was there. He led me into a lot of things that I have done when I got out. As I've become a stronger Christian, I've shared my tale with others, and I think I've made a difference in their lives. Be humble. You're not as good as you think you are. You'll never be that kind of person. We see some of us seem to have a very high opinion of ourselves. Get rid of it. You're just like everybody else. You put your pants on one leg at a time. Smile and be happy, because any other way is just not good. We got to cut it off.
No.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I don't know what it would be.
I think
Be
it's
willing
good.
to share with others and talk about what your life's like, because somebody's going to be interested. Maybe. If this is seen by any other vets or anybody else, and if I have made, with my story, if I can make any kind of difference in anybody's life, that makes me very happy and proud. I'd like to think that this will affect other Vietnam vets and encourage them to talk.
Well, Dale, on behalf of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, I thank you for your time and thank you for your story. Have a great day. Thank you.